Interesting, isn't it, that an unclean spirit recognizes the Lord, but people cannot? In fact, the unclean spirit is the first one in Mark's Gospel to proclaim Jesus as the Holy One of God. The people marveled at Jesus' words, liking what and how he taught. They focused on his message. It's easy to imagine them discussing his teachings for days. In fact, some folks have been discussing them for 2,000 years. The unclean spirit, on the other hand, does not talk about the message of Jesus, but about Jesus himself, who he is. Scientists speak of antimatter, the absolute opposite to matter. Contact between matter and antimatter results in the annihilation of both. The unclean spirit knew that in the presence of Jesus, it was faced with its opposite. So it shrieked, "Have you come to destroy us?" The spirit knew who Jesus is, because in Jesus it saw not teachings, but absolute good. The spirit saw the presence of God. Eventually, people recognized who Jesus is. Christians know that he is, indeed, what the unclean spirit proclaimed him to be, the Holy One of God. We follow the unclean spirit in proclaiming God's presence among us in Jesus Christ. It's not hard to think that I have more in common with an unclean spirit than that. There's much in my life that is as antimatter compared to the reality that is Jesus. When I look beyond myself to the church, I nearly despair. Our track record is not good at all. The terrible weapons that plague our lives were developed in the part of the world with the longest, most intense Christian influence. Some of the world's worst persecutions have been perpetrated by Christians who tortured one another in inquisitions and went after non-Christians in crusades, forced conversions, and the Holocaust. The destruction of the environment God created as a home for all, the creation of economic, social, and political systems that deprive men and women of their dignity as children of God, all these can be laid before followers of Christ with the words, "Here are your real children." Is this cause to give up? To decide that since we have so much of the demon about us, we should not presume to proclaim Christ? Should we give up doing what the unclean spirit did? The rest of the world is no less soiled and sordid than we. In fact, we can stand as a symbol of the world, know Christ on behalf of the world, and proclaim him for the sake of the world precisely because we are tainted with evil. It is when I recognize how far I am from the goodness of God that I can understand the awesomeness of God's love. When we confess our sinfulness, we can see its opposite, the Holy One of God. The first step in repentance is to admit our guilt, as when we go to confession. We admit our faults and failures out loud, making them painfully and embarrassingly real to ourselves. Then we are presented with the sin-overpowering love of God when we most recognize our need of it. And we come to a key difference between ourselves and the unclean spirit. The demon feared. We rejoice because we know that Christ, the Holy One of God, is only our opposite in terms of evil. In terms of love, we are beloved children of God. Therefore, we proclaim that the Holy One of God is among us, that there is hope for us in our uncleanness. We proclaim, like the Spirit in the Gospel, that Jesus is the opposite of our sinfulness. It might even be proper to say a grateful prayer for that Spirit, that it too might know Christ, not as its enemy, but as the love of God offered to all us unclean ones. Perhaps in God's mercy, we and that Spirit will one day share the joy of heaven.